Hello my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today I've got a book talk to share with you guys. Today we are talking about The Last Romantics by Conklin. You guys, I loved this book so much, and I can't wait to talk to you about it. I spent the last, 30 pages of this book just crying my way till the end. It's an amazing book. It's a book about family. It's a book about the ties that bind. It's a book about the things that rip us apart, and it's just a book full of humanity, and I loved it. So my one gripe about this is the title, The Last Romantics. That title alone made me almost not pick the book up to even read what it was about. Because if you've been around my channel for a while, you know I'm not super big into romance novels. That's not what catches my eye and draws me in. So I was a little iffy, but the cover and the colors were so beautiful. I was like, okay, what are you about? And I'm so glad I did. So maybe sometimes do judge a book by its cover and don't judge the book by its title. So I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say let's jump on into it. I'm going to say let's talk about the book. So the book opens up and it's 2079. So the book opens up and it's 2079, and right away we meet Fiona. She's a poet. She's having her first public appearance in 25 years. She's on a stage. She has an audience in front of her. When it gets time for opening up the floor to questions, a woman stands up. She says her name is Luna. And it's been well known that one of the poems in Fiona's most popular book is a character named Luna. And the girl's kind of like, my mom said you'd know why that character is named that, and I want to know about the real Luna. And so that kind of kicks us off, and it's this girl's question that leads to Fiona kind of taking us back in time to 1981. It's when we're back in 1981 that we meet Fiona as a young girl, the youngest of 4 siblings. She has 2 sisters, Caroline and Renee, and a brother, Joe. And when we first meet them, their father has just died. And I don't even know if it says how he died. If it does, I don't remember. It's not really important, of course. But he's died, and at the kind of gathering after the funeral, when everyone's kind of gathered around and talking, Joe, her brother, so Fiona's the youngest, and then I think Joe's the next oldest, and then it goes Caroline and Renee, I think. He, quite out of the blue, picks up a fire poker that had been by their fireplace, and he just kind of starts smashing things. You know, this little boy who's just lost his father, all of the feelings that he'd been trying to kind of keep together come bubbling to the surface, and he's just letting it out with this fire poker on inanimate objects, not on people. So they kind of get that under control, and then the funeral ends, everybody goes home, and after that their mother kind of just goes into her room and stays there. The children come to know this period of their life, which actually lasted for years, as the pause. Kind of when their mother just checked out. She'd never leave the house. She didn't have a job. She'd stay in her bedroom. She'd come out occasionally, like when one of the kids had a birthday. But then she'd disappear again for days at a time. And of course, as it would, the kind of raising of the children falls on the oldest of them, and then the 4 of them just kind of take care of themselves. During one of the summers, I think the first summer during the pause, they find, or Joe finds, a nearby pond, and he takes Fiona there. It's just this absolutely beautiful area, and there Joe teaches Fiona how to swim. And eventually the other sisters find out about the pond, and then some other neighborhood kids, and Fiona's kind of like, well, I hate this. This was mine and Joe's, special spot. But eventually she comes to just embrace that the other kids have taken it over as well, and then every summer that just becomes their special spot. And so during part one of the book, when we're meeting the children as children, we really get to see the bonds that they have with each other and the bonds that are forming and the way that their mother works. One of the beautiful things about this book is it spans almost a century. It takes us from when these people were children, and aside from Fiona, it takes us up through everybody's death even. We're given kind of that closure for each character because of the many, many years that are inside of this book. When they're children, we see that Joe has a real affinity for baseball. He joins the baseball team. Eventually, he gets to college on a baseball scholarship. Everyone else leaves home. Caroline, Renee, and Joe, and then eventually Fiona's the last one left because she's the baby. I imagine that would be really hard. I was the older sibling in my family, so I was the one doing the leaving. But I can imagine being the one left behind. Sorry, guys. I don't know why that hit me so hard. I was just thinking about my sister. Oh, being left behind. Oh, okay, I took a little bit of a break. Now I'm back. So yes, they're all leaving. Fiona's the one left at home. By the time this point comes, their mom, whose name is Noni, that's what they call her as well. They don't call her mom, they call her Noni on her insistence. And she's back out in the world. She's got a job. She's functioning again as a mom. The grief had just really knocked her off her feet. And of course, as a mom, you just can't let that happen. But it did. But she's moved past it. So that's great. Caroline ends up getting married pretty young and starting a family and having kids. Renee ends up becoming a transplant surgeon. Fiona, as we know from the beginning, she's a poet. She also, for many, many, many years of her life, worked at an environmentalist office. Even after her books were published and she became very popular, she kept working there. Joe, when he was in college, he was there, as I had mentioned briefly earlier, on a baseball scholarship. And while he's there, Caroline and Renee tell the mom and Fiona that he had an injury and threw his knee out, and he's not going to be able to play baseball anymore. But we later find out that that wasn't the truth, and that they felt Fiona, at the time that it happened, was too young to tell the truth to, and their mom, they weren't going to tell her what really happened. And what really happened was that Joe got into a really difficult situation with too much alcohol and too much drugs, and there was a situation where there was a party at the fraternity that he was a member of that got out of control, and he got kicked off the team. And he's lucky he didn't get kicked out of school, but his sister was able to convince them to let him keep attending school. Later, he goes on to work a fairly big time job as in finance or banking, and he's engaged for a while to a woman named Sandrine. When I was reading, anytime I would see her name, I always thought it said Sardine. I'm like, no, it's not Sardine, Sandrine. And she's just not really a great fit for him. She comes from a wealthy family, very put together. She liked him because he was very handsome, had a good job, but they're engaged to be married at one point, and Caroline, I think it's Caroline or Renee, one of the older sisters, they're really concerned about Joe and the amount that he's drinking and the drugs that he's doing still, even now as an adult out of college and just in the workplace. And the thing about Joe, especially when we were reading the first part when he was a little boy, was he was so sensitive, and he was hurt by a lot of things. He was easily hurt by things, and the things that hurt him deeply. But he cared so much about his sisters, and he fiercely protected them when their mom was away on the pause. That was kind of his role, protector, physical protector even, because at one point I think it's Renee. She's walking home one evening when she's a teenager, and she's followed in the street by a predator in a car. And he actually eventually gets out of his car and starts chasing her. And Joe, when he's at home, for some reason, it just strikes him like, where's Renee? Why isn't she home? Because at this point, it's like an hour and a half past when she should be home. And he goes out and he finds her and protects her. So I think for a lot of it, the reason Joe turns so intensely into drugs and alcohol is because he's trying to find a way to kind of numb the pain that he feels so deeply. I think he's very empathetic. I think he feels a lot of other people's pain as well. So eventually the drugs become a problem at work and he gets fired, which he's kind of shocked by because the business that he works for is owned by one of his fraternity brothers, a brother that parties with him often and, you know, kind of encourages that excessive behavior. But so that shows you how off the edge kind of Joe had gone, that even someone who also kind of engages in that behavior thought that, oh, he's gone a little too far with it. So after he loses his job, it's not long after that his fiance leaves him, and Joe kind of packs it all up. He lives in New York. He packs it all up and he moves to Miami, Florida. He moves down there, and while he's down there, I think he lives there for a little over 2 years. And while he's down there, like, his mom goes to visit once, but his sisters never do, and he's just kind of drifted away from them. But when he's down there, he meets a woman named Luna, whose name you might remember from the beginning of the book as the young girl who was at the poetry reading asking Fiona who the real Luna was. So as soon as her name pops up, we're like, oh, okay, now we're getting to the part where we're going to find out who the real Luna is. So she's a woman that Joe falls very in love with. And while they don't know each other very long, about 3 months, they're just crazy about each other. And Joe has feelings for this girl that he never had for Sandrine. And he asks her to move in with him. And, you know, he's excited. He's feeling good. He's still drinking, but not really as hard as he was. And the drugs are pretty much gone. So they're busy planning a life together. But then one evening, they're sitting out on the patio, just kind of drinking together. And Joe goes into the house to open up another bottle of wine or something, whatever the reason is. Hang on, before we go any further, here's the point where I'm going to start talking about spoilers. So if this sounds like a book you would love to read, and you should read it. It's so good. Click away now. If you don't want to know what happens, the big moment kind of. And yeah, would 100% recommend. If you love beautiful, well-written stories with well-written characters that you're going to care a lot about, The Last Romantics is the book for you. There's a poetic beauty to the way that Tara writes. I can't wait to read more books from her. This was the first one I've ever read, and she's quickly jumped to the top of my list of authors to keep an eye out for. So Luna hears a loud bang, and she goes inside and she sees that Joe's on the floor in the kitchen, and he looks up at her and he motions for her to come lay with him. And, you know, there are already a few glasses of wine in, so she just kind of laughs and goes and lays her head on his chest. And then morning comes and she gets up and she's got to go, and so she just gives him a kiss and then goes off to work. They didn't live together, but Joe had asked her to move in, and she was going to. So after the night together with the wine, and it's been a couple of days since Luna's heard from Joe, which seemed a little weird, but she was like, he's probably busy at work, and she was busy at work, so she didn't read too much into it until the police come to her place of work, and they tell her that he's dead, and that he died about 3 days ago. And they're like, when's the last time you saw him? And she was like, three days ago. She's like, we had a date, and then we fell asleep in the kitchen, and then I went to work. And he was like, yeah, well, that was when he died. And so she explains to him what happened, how he had fallen, and then she came and laid with him, and he was like, oh, when you came and laid with him, he was dying. And she's like, but how? He looked at me and then closed his eyes and immediately fell asleep. And so I guess what had happened was he had an aneurysm and it kind of just happened. So for a while, the police dig into Luna and her background and seeing if there was any foul play, but eventually it's deemed that there wasn't. Then Joe's sisters come into town. Of course, they're getting ready to bury him, lay him to rest, and one of the sisters goes and tries to find Luna. I think it was Renee that did. And so she went to her place of work, and Luna was there, but she said she wasn't. And Renee just freaks out, is yelling and screaming, and then Luna kind of takes off. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, Fiona and Renee find an engagement ring in the drawer with Joe's things. And it kind of brings them a little bit of comfort to know that he had been planning to propose to Luna. You know, they take a bit of comfort in knowing that, you know, they had drifted apart over the years, but he was happy and he loved somebody and somebody loved him back. So Fiona and Caroline kind of get it in their mind that they want to find Luna for the purpose of giving her the ring. You know, Fiona's like, this isn't our ring. You know, it wouldn't be right to take it or sell it or keep it. Like, Joe wanted Luna to have it, so let's make sure she gets it. This proves to be more difficult than it sounds, and they are years trying to track Luna down. They hire private investigators. They hire psychics to ask if they can help, and nobody can find her. So eventually, and for the most part, they stop looking. Caroline and Fiona. Renee never wanted to find her. Renee's like, no, she was probably using him. Like, why didn't we know about her? Why hadn't we met her? So Renee's not convinced, but Fiona and Caroline are. So meanwhile, of course, while all of this is happening, so much else is happening. You know, we're learning more about all of the sisters and their relationships and what's going on in their lives. But it's the story of Joe that kind of threads through the book that ties it all together. So that's kind of why I'm focusing on that. So if I focus on everybody's stories, we'd be here for 4 hours. And I know nobody wants that. I don't either. So eventually what happens is, many years later, like at this point we're talking Fiona is in her 50s or 60s probably. She kind of accidentally finds Luna. And she calls her and asks if she can come. She feels a little bad as she's traveling there because Caroline had been so invested too in the whole Luna thing, but Fiona goes without her. And there's a point where she says, you know, she feels like this, of everything that I've ever done to any of my sisters, is the biggest betrayal, not telling Caroline that I'm going. So she goes and she sits down with Luna and she's like, wow, it's amazing to see you finally face to face. You know, it's been so many years. And so Luna was a good deal younger. Luna was a good deal younger than Joe. Like, not inappropriately younger, but just, a good deal younger. And so now she is in her early 40s. So say Fiona's in her 50s. Luna's in her 40s. And so she's got a few young children. And after they chat for a bit, Fiona says, I brought something for you. And she takes the box out and she puts it on the table. And Luna's kind of like, oh, no. Like, immediately she knows. Like, and Luna's shaking her head because she does know what it is, but Fiona takes that as she's shaking her head because she doesn't know what it is. So Fiona explains it to her. She's like, no, it's fine. This is the ring that we found in Joe's apartment. And it's yours. It's your ring. And Fiona's like, you should take that. That was so long ago, and it's so painful to think about it. I try not to think about it. I want to forget the whole thing. And that kind of sucks the wind right from Fiona's whole body. She's like, forget about it. Like, forget about my brother. And Luna's like, no, I don't mean that. It's just, you have to understand how painful it was. I think you should take the ring. Give it to your niece or a nephew when he's proposing. Like, keep it in the family. And it's at that time that a child walks into the house. And Fiona has a flash because Joe just walked in. like 15-year-old Joe. And she's very taken aback. And she looks at Luna, and Luna looks at her, and then the realization kind of passes between the two of them that when Joe died, Luna had been pregnant, and this was Joe's child. And you can see a bit of panic in Luna's face, because I would probably imagine that it's been a fear of Luna's for this child's whole life that if any of Joe's family members got wind of it, they might try and come and fight her for custody or something. So you can see the panic on her face as she's knowing that Fiona is realizing that this is Joe's child, because, you know, according to the book, he looks so much like him that for a brief split second, Fiona thinks it's Joe. And then Fiona's like, oh, okay, I have to go. I have to leave now. Please keep the ring. Keep it. Give it to Joe. And maybe one day he can give it to his kid, or he can propose with it, whatever he wants to do. And she's very flustered. She spills her tea, and Luna's like, do you want to say goodbye to Rory? And Rory's the child. And Fiona says, no, I don't want to say goodbye to him. I don't want to see him again. But please tell him it was nice to meet him. And when Fiona says that she doesn't want to say goodbye, Luna's kind of filled with relief. And then Fiona leaves, and she never tells her sisters about the trip she took to go and meet Luna, or the fact that Joe has a living child in the world. Even though I would kind of imagine that to Fiona, the fact that Joe does have a child in this world might bring her a bit of comfort, knowing that there's a piece of him that still exists. But she doesn't give that comfort to her sisters because, like Luna, she worries that maybe Caroline or Renee would go and try to fight to get that child in their lives, where, you know, he's 15 years old at this point. It's just, he settled into a life with his mother, and that wouldn't be fair. So Fiona keeps that to herself. And yeah, that's pretty well the story of The Last Romantics. As for the young girl Luna at the book signing, it's never said specifically who she is, but I imagine that she's the daughter of Joe's son, because when she's at the book signing, she wears the engagement ring around her neck on a chain. So I'm thinking Rory, Joe's son, had a child, and she is that child, and he gave it to her. And that's nice. I like that. So that's my takeaway from it. If you've read this book, do you have a different takeaway for Luna? But yeah, I loved this book so much. I loved the characters. I didn't want it to end, honestly. Every time I pick it up, I'd be sad because it'd be closer to the end. And that's the mark of a good book for me, when you're enjoying living in that world so much, you don't want to have to leave. So yeah, if you've read any other Tara Conklin novels, let me know which ones you liked. Here it says she's the New York Times bestselling author of The House Girl, so I don't know if that's the only other book she's read. I haven't done any research about her yet. So yeah, I tend to wait until after especially if it's a new author. If it's one I already know about, then cool. But if it's a new author, I wait to learn anything about them or the book until after I film my review. That way I can kind of get my unbiased opinion up, and then I can go read what other people thought about it. So anyway, you guys, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. If you're new here, please subscribe. It's free, but it helps me out a ton. And yeah, I will see you guys on Monday with a vlog. Bye, guys.